Well, we'll go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everybody today for our presentation by Ray Shepard that you've already got the literature on and background. We're particularly pleased that METV, Manatee Educational TV, is here to document and carry our meeting today. Now, what's news with us? Our authors table, which is up here at the far right-hand side or corner up here as you come in, we'll have some books from some of our members, some other literature that you can pick up today on various activities that our members are doing, and also additional handouts about our speakers' responsibilities that are there. I'd like to point out that we're in December. This is a wonderful time to make donations for tax purposes. We have a scholarship program with State College of Florida. We've been very lucky in having some excellent students that have been selected for this scholarship program. If you would care to, and to help us out a bit with enhancing our scholarship program for this year, you can make a donation by check to State College of Florida. And if you write at the bottom of it, Broadcasters Scholarship, we'll get credit and you'll get the tax deduction. Foundation, State College of Florida Foundation. A website, we've got two things on there that if you haven't been on lately, they'll be interesting. One is we have our first effort to start our mentoring program with educational outreach. It's a form you can fill out online and submit and say, yes, I would volunteer to be a mentor, and we'll match you up with students at various universities who've agreed to accept our offer of mentorship. The second thing is, and we'll be announcing with some handouts on your table today, our broadcasting tour, boutique tour to Italy in May of 2016. That's a maximum of 14 people that can go on that tour, and the program is on your table, and additional copies are on your author's table. You can also get that by going to our website, broadcastersclub.com, click on News, and the entire program is there. The other thing is we are doing our meet and greets changed, starting again in January. It will be at Gecko's on Hillview, and it'll be the fourth Tuesday of each month. So it'll be January 26th. That gives us a little more spread between our luncheons and our meet and greets. And now in the program, I'd like to have Erwin Starr come up in the part of the program that I call What's Up, Erwin?
Feels like a press conference today with two cameras and two microphones, and I'm mumbling to myself. Story of my life. I said it feels like a press conference today with two microphones and two cameras and all of that's kind of good stuff. So anyway, what's going on? The broadcast industry, as you've heard over many years, is suffering some loss of viewers in television, but cable is suffering the same thing. And some surprising information came out recently. This is according to the hedge fund manager, Eric Jackson of Tech and Media, and he went into the 10K filings of ESPN's parent company, Walt Disney. And he discovered that ESPN is taking about a $900 million hit from loss of subscribers. They're estimating that ESPN is losing 7 million subscribers. Now, what a subscriber is to ESPN is anybody who pays the cable company their annual monthly fee, because every cable head end that has a ESPN coverage or networks on it is paying somewhere between $5 and $7 a month to ESPN to carry it. You're paying for it, of course, but you take $7 a month times the number of cable operations there are times the number of months, and you can figure out how much money they are suffering. And that's why you're seeing things about them cutting back and changing. But the point is, cable is changing as well as television. There is one study that is showing that as of this last year, more people are watching video on the internet, actually television on the internet, than over-the-air and cable combined. Now, I'm talking now about the over-the-air television stations. You have over-the-air television, which reaches you over the air and on cable. More people are using the internet to watch television than are watching those two means. Now, it's overall all television on the internet, not just the networks, but that's, again, part of the change that's going on in our community. There's I can find the right place here. There's a guy named Chuck Lorre. You've probably seen a few of his sitcoms on television. And at the end of his sitcoms, he often has a large screen of very small type that says Chuck Lorre Productions. And you have to freeze the VCR or whatever to read it. But what it is he's got kind of little editorials in there about things that are going on. And he did a recent editorial, and the comment was on the fact that CBS is going to be producing brand new Star Trek shows. The problem is they're going to play them only on their internet CBS called CBS On and not on their television network. And he wrote what he calls the epitaph for television. And he said, at the end of it, R.I.P. Network Television, 1948 to 2015. In lieu of flowers, CBS has requested that mourners send them $6 a month. And that refers, of course, to the $5.99 that CBS wants in order for you to subscribe to CBS Now. If I were still running a local television station and a CBS affiliate, I'd be madder than hell. But again, it's part of the change that's going on in our industry right now. Let's see. There is a man named Bob Garfield. Anybody know the name Bob Garfield? Bob Garfield was a major writer for Ad Age for many years. He's a freelance writer now and frequently comments on advertising and television and the rest of it. And he was reviewing recently on the internet a new book by a man named Tom Goodwin, by David Rogers, called The Digital Transformation Playbook. The review sounds interesting, and it will be out in April. However, in that book, the author, Mr. Rogers, quotes a man named Tom Goodwin, a senior vice president at Havas Media. And this shows you again the influence of the internet. He says, Uber, the world's largest taxi company, owns no vehicles. Facebook, the world's most popular media owner, creates no content. Alibaba, the most valuable retailer, has no inventory. And Airbnb, the world's largest accommodation provider, owns no real estate. There's something interesting happening here, is his comment. I would suggest that the networks and the local television stations, for their own coexistence and their own future, ought to get together and figure out what that means. The bottom line he got from it was, quote, with the many new media fortunes and businesses are built on creating marketplaces for two or more independent parties, all of whom get value from the process. And all of you can be geniuses and figure out how to make that work for over-the-air television and how to save local television stations. If I were running one, I'd hire you as a consultant if you come up with the answer to that question. So change continues. Thank you.
We've run a little bit overtime here with our announcements and everything today, so we're going to go ahead and start the program because we still have to finish at a precise time. So I'd like to introduce our main speaker today, who's Ray Shepard. He's the Director of the Defense Media Activity. Now that tells you a lot, particularly since it's military. You probably haven't any idea what that encompasses. But what Ray's responsible for, both to the Secretary of Defense and to the military people that he serves and to the Congress that he has to respond to is he's in charge of Armed Forces Radio and Television, an organization that reaches out in 140 countries to provide television programming to our troops overseas. In addition, he uses up to 12 satellites and quite a production. But the production primarily is created by the broadcast industry. And Ray will be here to tell you about their role and activities. He spoke yesterday about the other activities he's responsible for, which includes the Defense Information School, a university, if you will, the multimedia activities that they do, the social media activities that they're involved in communication, the magazines, Stars and Stripes, daily newspapers, the and the list you've got on your table. You can see that he's responsible and taken on quite a heavy load of responsibility. And so, Ray, if you'd come up now and give us a rundown on what everything is going, and he'll probably talk today mostly about Armed Forces Radio and Television, as we're a broadcasters group.
First and foremost, I want to say thank you to all of you for inviting me to come and talk to you. These are your sons, daughters, cousins, uncles, nieces, nephews who are out there serving the country. My job is to make sure we provide them the best information. As you all know, they're all volunteers, and they do a lot of great service for our country. So we take it upon ourselves as an honor to be able to make sure we provide that information to them so that they're completely informed about what's happening here in the country when they're off someplace else in the world serving. And we also provide them a little entertainment. And that's the kind of thing I'm going to talk to you a little bit about today. But before I do that, let me tell you a little bit more about the defense media activity and how we all came about to be. This, believe it or not, was an efficiency measure made by Congress back in 2005. What they found was we had a variety of organizations throughout the Department of Defense that were creating visual information, broadcasting operations, television productions, newspapers, magazines. And so Congress decided they would make that a little more efficient and get us all out of all these different buildings throughout Washington, D.C. and down in San Antonio, Texas, and bring us all up to Fort Meade, Maryland. Well, that act was in 2005. After a lot of construction and building, we actually moved into a building in 2008. Now, what Congress told us to do is we told us to co-locate all these different operations, which, as you could imagine, that everyone was ready to do that because they didn't mind moving, but they didn't want to be together. So what we've discovered, though, and over time, is that we actually have consolidated. And some of the things I'm going to talk to you about today as a result of just recognizing that we are better when we work together. And each of the services have come together while they still produce their individual products that looked exactly like they did when they were separate. They have a lot of help from other organizations within our building. So that's pretty much what the DMA has already done. Now, we did more than just broadcasting, but I'm going to focus primarily on the broadcasting side. But before I do that, let me just give you a picture for what else is out there for us. The sheet I had to do on each of your tables is a brief discussion of all the things that we have going on in one building. As you can see, it's quite a bit. So anywhere from web services to graphic production, visuals from both still and video, news feature, so I have a number of writers, multimedia, which is a new trend we see in terms of what we need to be able to do, and we also archive all the stills and videos that all the Department of Defense does. So if you can imagine all the photographers around the world who work for the military or the videographers around there documenting all the things that happen through the military in various locations, all that material comes into one building. I'll tell you that for a reason here just in a moment. So we also direct to the radio and television, which is I'm also going to talk about, and that's located throughout the world. We're actually, our Armed Forces Radio and Television Service now operates in about 15 countries. And we also take care of about 180 Navy ships at sea that are floating in various places between the Pacific, Atlantic, the Mediterranean, and around those areas. One of the things, the new areas that we also took over, and some of the news media who, if you may, are still operating, is an organization called DIVITS, which is a defense visual imagery distribution system. It's located down in Atlanta, Georgia, and it's actually, once again, a depository for all the videos and those programs. So I give you all that information only to tell you that from a broadcasting standpoint, what our broadcasters do today actually take advantage of all the material produced by all the other folks that are multimedia, our videographers and photographers, and the fact that we have the depository of all the videos and stills coming in from around the world, we're able to actually bring that on for our broadcasters to use. Now, the broadcasting you saw back in the old days that you were old days, my days, we typically looked at broadcasting over the air. Cable is some relatively been around for quite a while. So we usually produced long-form stories, or we produced news stories that typically were anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. Well, those kinds of things are still going on. However, we've changed a few things as well. We've added a few things. With the advent of the internet and news, shorts, the demand from our audience for much shorter stories, we find our broadcasters are now producing more stories in the 1 minute to 2 minute realm. And if you yourselves have probably watched a news story on the internet, and you find that's generally about the size of time that to put in there. So what it requires from our broadcasters today is something that's always been a challenge for all of us, and when we had short time news, is content has to be very precise. And so our broadcasters today are really work hard to make sure that we can get all of the story down to 2 minutes. Now, that's not always an easy thing to do. It is a real challenge, but they've taken on that challenge, and actually, quite honestly, they've done quite well with it. Let me give you a couple of examples. And I've got them here. If you look at that sheet of paper I provided, there's a website called defense.gov. And it is the Department of Defense's primary website for all the information that's released at the DoD level. Now, my folks who all produce all the content for that. Now, one of the things we've found in today's world in terms of getting information out and having people understand it, visuals and video are almost absolutely essential if you want to effectively communicate a story. So the things that the broadcasters did today, they're also part of producing that material so that we can provide that visual information as well. So what you'll see is our defense.news is we have a program called DoD News. And we'll take the news stories that the writers have produced and take along with that video that we may have gotten from the writer who may have been able to do a short story video for us, or some of the archived material, and we'll produce a 2-minute news piece. We'll be able to take the information that the writers have produced and be able to turn that into a broadcast product. Very short, very quick, 2 minutes, very effective. We can get a soundbite from one of our senior leaders. We can get a soundbite from one of our young soldiers who are out there and be able to tell that story. It has much more significant impact. Now, what we're also able to do that in terms of being able to take care of that, because we take care of the internet quite a bit. As you know, when you look at Facebook, you look at Twitter, and you look at Instagram, one of the key successes of those type mediums is conversation. And that's the thing that we look at is we put a story out, we'll put the story out and we'll monitor it for about 24 hours or so just to see what the conversation is like, what the reactions are, whether it's positive, negative. Did we hit the mark in terms of getting information out? You know, if you remember the old days when we used to put a story out, success was the story got released. Whether we ever got any feedback or not was always questions. Well, that has changed considerably now, and now we actually go for that feedback. It's absolutely essential for us to effectively make sure we're communicating the right story. So you won't see the kinds of traditional stand-up reporter telling you everything that's there for you to know, and then going about his business. What we try to do is we try to make sure that we tell the story from the soldier's perspective, or from the airman's perspective, or from the sailor, making sure that when we're talking to our internal audience that they actually can see someone that they're familiar with, someone they can directly relate to. So our broadcasters are out there being able to make sure they tell that story. Now, I was talking to Roger, my good friend that I used to work with on the engineering side, and the folks who are recording this. Interestingly enough, from a technical side, the old idea of a broadcaster walking out with a 3-man crew has gone away. Now we're down to one person. And even more so, it's not just one person. It's usually a still camera with video capability. And we're finding more and more, because we own a number of cameras, as you can well imagine, both on the still and the video side. My young folks who are averaging age from about 20 to, I'd say, about 24, 25, are typically grabbing our still cameras because they find that's much lighter, just as effective, and it still is able to tell a story much better for them. And depending on where they're going, for example, I was telling folks yesterday that I just had a crew come back from Vietnam who were doing body recovery from Vietnam. We still are searching for those who are missing. And so we sent a crew out to do that. Well, they took all still cameras. Now, still camera, just from a technical side, will take about an hour's worth of high-definition video. For most stories to be told, you don't need an hour worth of video, so they're able to take that out. What that does for them, from the standpoint of being able to tell a story, is they can get a lot more places and have a lot more flexibility in the stories they can tell. And we've seen that happen as well. You're probably all familiar, have heard the cameras GoPros. I have 200 of those, and it's hard for me to keep those inactive. Most of the time, our folks are using those quite a bit because if you understand what the young kids are looking for is action and activity. And if my primary audience is in the 18 to 34, and if I'm a Marine, it's down to 18 to 22. So they're looking for a lot of activity and making sure they see things move. And so being able to use GoPros, we're even now experimenting with occasional drone here and there, just so we can get a real appreciation for what they're having to do. So my folks went on this Vietnam trip I was telling you about earlier, and they were able to use all that equipment to tell a fabulous story. You'll be able to catch that online at defense.gov and probably in another couple of days when I finalize it. I would urge you, if you had an opportunity, to take a look at that website and take a look at some of the videos that we produced on there. Also, we also try to make sure that we are able to reach each of the services as well. So the Navy has their website and their videos, as well as the Army, Navy, and the Marine Corps. And the story being told on each of those is uniquely designed for that particular service. For example, if you go to the Marine Corps, it's going to be a lot of guns, a lot of noise, and a lot of activity. If you go to the Air Force, it's a little slower, but there's a lot of airplanes, a lot of activity. But we try to make sure we focus on the individual story. I can't overstress that enough. That is really the key. If we're going to keep our volunteer force informed about what they do and why they're there, we owe it to them to make sure they have the correct information about why their particular operation makes a difference. And so we take a lot of time and effort to make sure we're able to do just that. A couple of other things that we've done, and I think I'm excited about, is we've developed a use of all our technology together. Now, we'll take the old basic concept of what broadcasters used to do with live broadcasting, and we've taken it one step further. We'll take a live broadcast, which we will broadcast over our Armed Forces radio and television to our folks overseas and our Navy ships at sea, and we'll combine that with an internet service where we'll stream that on video live. We've taken additionally to that, we will also take care of feeding those questions and answers to people and give them the opportunity to Skype in, to find us on Facebook or Twitter, and to send questions in to somebody we have on live. A couple of examples. We've just a couple of days ago, we had the Secretary of the Air Force come in to visit our studios. So the Secretary was able to sit in our studio with a broadcaster and an audience of about 100 people there, and she was able to tell what's happening in the Air Force and keeping everything up to date and bringing these folks in. Now, our studio audience, which was normally what the broadcasters would do, were able to ask questions. But in addition to that, the Secretary was able to have questions asked of her directly and live from Alaska, from Germany, from Gitmo, from Guantanamo Bay. The Secretary was able to see the person on the screen and actually have a conversation with them live. That's a much different concept before. If you remember those days when you were broadcasting, that's a live newscast, and the budget guys were screaming because they knew you were spending way too much money to do this. Well, that's all gone away. Now the internet provides us a very inexpensive way of being able to have a conversation with our folks. And I will tell you that's a tremendous way to be able to, because the Secretary and any leader we have is able to come in there and really deliver a message, and it's not stilted, not staged. It hasn't been staffed 25 or 28 times to be able to make sure we get the right answer. He's being sincere and honestly in delivering that message to them. I will tell you, we've been so successful with that. We actually had the Secretary of Defense, and most recently, a few months ago, the President of the United States. And all of them have experienced that same thing, and they all came with the same comment. It's pretty neat to be able to talk to somebody that way. As a matter of fact, the President made a comment about it. It was kind of neat. We had him talk with one of the Navy ship. A sailor was sailing out in the Mediterranean, and he was able to have a conversation with him. Couldn't do that in the old days. Even our satellite and trucks, there just wasn't enough for that. But the new technology and the way we've designed everything at the Defense Media Activity now allows us to be able to do that. And it's an exciting way to do business, I'll tell you. Our folks get a lot of real kick out of being able to do that. And our leadership does too, because not only does it just save time, but you also know you can reach a lot more people. Now, taking advantage of some of that, and particularly when we look at somehow our broadcasters operate, we've also been able to take advantage of the internet in a couple of other ways. If you recall, last Monday was the 74th anniversary of Pearl Harbor. A very large activity was happening in Pearl Harbor, and they were recognizing, well, our broadcasters worked together with our multimedia people to put together a short little story about 2 minutes long. It's still on the internet today, where we were able to put that story together and post it on the internet on defense.gov on that anniversary day. Within 24 hours, we were able to reach 18 million people. That's pretty phenomenal. And we haven't gotten the latest count on there, but I'm sure it's a lot higher than that now. But in addition to reaching 18 million people, we also got I think if I remember right, I've got to look at my numbers here, about 6 million people who actually made comments on it and were able to interact with other people on the internet from that video. One piece. That was always a challenge for us to be able to reach that kind of folks, and we now have that capability of doing. Our broadcasters are able to do that very, very effectively. Some of the other things we're also able to do is we still do the traditional podcast. We still do our radio operations. We've taken our radio one step further in that we're providing it not only broadcasting to the folks overseas, but we also are doing the internet services as well. We have what we call AFN 360, American Forces Network 360 degrees. So taking akin to satellite radio, we've taken each of the individual programs, whether you like classical, country, rock and roll, just a mix of music, and we put about together 8 different varieties of music, and we're able to broadcast over the internet for those folks who are living overseas. Now, what that does for us is that those people who are in places like Japan and Germany, where the internet and services are a little more stable, it's an additional service for them. Now, those folks in Afghanistan, in Iraq, which we now have folks back in that operations, and some other locations that are very remote, we are able to provide that service to them, and now they can listen to the information that they want on their style and still get the information we also deliver to them as well. So if you're seeing the trend is really coming down to is we're trying to deliver the kind of messages and the kind of stories for the audience that wants to listen to them. If you remember the days in the broadcasting, everyone had their favorite network that they would tune to, and everyone just sort of watched that one. Well, we don't have that luxury of being able to provide every single network to our folks overseas. We broadcast about 8 channels of television to our folks and about 12 radio stations. Our primary for our Navy and our folks who are remote locations are only 3 television channels, primarily because of technology and bandwidth. But of those 3 stations, we provide all sports, all news, and 1 entertainment channel that we would all probably die for. The broadcast industry and their generosity has provided us a programming, and we're able to take the Nielsen ratings and take the top-rated shows from all the networks and put them into 1 channel. So you don't only have to worry about switching around. You pretty much make sure to do that. Same thing with the news and with our sports. The generosity of the folks who provide that kind of programming is at no cost to the U.S. government. So if you can imagine, we're able to operate 8 channels of television, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with a budget of $5 million a year. Now, for those of you who've been in the broadcast business for a while, you'll recognize the fact that $5 million won't get you very far. In fact, I used to jokingly tell them, if I had $5 million in the real commercial world, there would be a lot of hand puppets going on in some of those channels. The average program is anywhere from $350,000 to $500,000 per episode for a program, and we're able to pay the administrative cost. So thank you very much to the broadcast industry and the programming, because without it, those soldiers and sailors out there in those remote areas would not have that level of programming. Now, I talked to a group earlier, and I want to tell you one of the things that's really important for me to emphasize. When we talk about radio and television overseas to our broadcasters and what they provide, it's not as much as about entertainment as it is about information. I will tell you, having been over time overseas for many years myself when I was on active duty, when you're sitting there watching a television program, it's not as much about whether it's funny or not. You're watching what clothes they're wearing. You're watching what kind of vernacular they're using. What's the latest phrases everybody's there. You're trying to cut touch with home. That's your connection with what's happening in the world and where you came from. And when you look at some of the places where our folks are stationed, that's a pretty big thing. That's very, very important for them to be able to provide that information to them. Now, sports. Sports is the one unifying thing that we all share. I know a lot of folks saying, well, I'd probably watch the other channel, but I will tell you, to be able to watch the young folks get together during a sporting event and be able to talk about it and have their favorite team on television, that is immeasurably valuable for their morale. Because they'll come out, they'll be out in the field for a while, and they'll come back and they'll be able to sit down and watch a football game. I'll tell you, you have a luxury here. Super Bowl comes on, early evening, and it's over by 10, 11 o'clock, so you can go back to bed. Having lived overseas, it starts at midnight. Monday Night Football, it starts at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning sometimes. So, but they're up. They're watching it, and they're watching it together. It's a unifying force for our folks overseas to be able to have that privilege and the honor to be able to have that programming for them. And I will tell you, we really just can't thank the industry enough for being able to provide that for us. Our broadcasters also want to make sure they provide what we call command information. That's literally just local community information that you would find on your local radio and television station. So in those 15 locations I mentioned earlier, we have actual broadcasters running actual radio and television stations. Something very similar to what Roger and I ran when we were overseas in Europe. So we'll have a broadcaster who will do a morning show during drive time as the folks are coming to work. They'll have an afternoon show where they'll be able to tell them what's happening on the community and what's happening in the news for them locally. And they'll have drive time going home as well. Just the kind of radio you find here at home. And when you're looking at, have to add traffic jams sometimes if you're in places like Stuttgart, Germany, or you're places called Ramstein or Misawa, Japan. But also awareness activities, things that you and I would not think about. What's the latest security posture? Making sure that they remember to do their will, make sure they remember to take care of their family. Remind them when you got to mail your packages to get them back over, back to the United States for Christmas. Those kinds of things we rarely pay attention to here in the United States, but those are very important for us over there, and we actually do listen to those. So our broadcasters make sure they provide that information to them. The same thing happens on television. Most of the television is broadcast from one of our broadcasting center in Riverside, California. March Air Force Base is where we located. I have 250 people there who actually put all this programming together, and a satellite farm behind it who are able to transmit that programming around the world. We broadcast over to the east and the west, and we're able to hook up with as Tom mentioned, about 12 satellites we connect up. Our ability to reach 98% of the globe with that service. And we're able to, and it's 24/7. So our broadcasters there are producing most of the television information, and it's almost the stuff that's interested for Department of Defense. But one of the things we also try to do is remind them of the little things, and I just personally remember this story. We ran a commercial, what we call commercial or a spot, about just the military code, and what happens if you're captured. Something you would never think about here if you're here in the United States. But we ran that information. One of our broadcasters produced that particular spot. It was only about 1 minute long, and it played for quite a long time. Well, fast forward to the first Gulf War, and we had somebody actually captured. And when we got them back, and they do the debriefing, and they talk about, well, what was the most important thing that you could remember? He says, I remember the AFN commercial. It told me what to do when I got captured. So those commercials are very valuable for us, and our broadcasters are able to put those together. A number of other ones that you wouldn't think are very important here are very important there in terms of information. So it's really about, when we start providing command information, it's less about making sure you have clean socks when you go out in the field and more about making sure you take care of yourself and knowing your rights. We also spend a lot of time reminding them of the things that happen here. We have a very interesting program what we just call a state quiz. It's a series of all 52 states where we ask them questions about the particular state, and they have to name the state at the very end of it. Most of us didn't get it right. You typically, the only person who'll get it right is the one who's from that particular state. And you can't imagine the enthusiasm that person has when he's seeing all this information about a state and he can say, I know where I am. Like, did you know that the only diamond mine in the United States is in Arkansas? Never knew they had a diamond mine, right? There you go. State quiz. So let me conclude by just telling you a couple things. Really, the value of our broadcasters today and what we do, while the method and the distribution has changed, the content has not changed. Information is still king. Content is what's more important. We have just found new and innovative ways to be able to get that content out. The second most valuable thing for us is having a conversation with our folks. We make sure that what we do is just that, having a conversation. Because it's important to us to be able to effectively communicate with our folks by being able to get that feedback and to know that we are reaching them with the information they need. That's all I have. Thank you very much. Well, we have about 800 spots in our inventory, and we probably broadcast about 2 hours worth of commercials during a particular day, 8-hour day. We train them primarily, and this is what happens usually with the military. And I had to look it up because somebody asked me that question yesterday. Everyone who signs up for the military as a volunteer, they take what they call the ASVAB, which is I had to look it up, Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Board. Battery. That test determines what vocation you probably are going to be good at. Based on that score, the military will give you a series of choices of what you can pick to do. And then if you pick to be a broadcaster, we will bring you to school. Typically, all the different occupations that are in the military have a school associated with it. Ours happen to be located at Fort Meade as well. And depending on what service you are, it is anywhere from 87 days to 100 days. We'll teach them how to be broadcasters, writers, videographers, graphic artists, you name it, whatever the gamut is within the journalism, public affairs area, we have training for all that. Yes? Yeah, that's a good question. Cyber attacks is always a concern for everyone these days. And we've got a pretty elaborate system working with our military as well as with our commercial side of the house. Because, quite frankly, security is probably just as important to a commercial vendor as it is to the military. So we work with a company called Akamai who provides us our internet security services. And it's worked very well in terms of being able to do that. And we are constantly being looked at and constantly attacked, as everyone is these days. So far, we've been able to stop it so far. But it is something we have to watch. Yes, okay. Right, sure. I sure can. Let me address the first one first. USIS or USIA, U.S. Information Agency, is a part of the State Department. And they provided news and information typically in the language of the host country that they were broadcasting into. And it was the idea of those places that were not so much in democracy to provide them with a variety of different issues and concerns. And so they broadcast strictly for that language. So and it's not uncommon for them they'll be in Spanish, they'll be in Greek, they'll be in Farsi. So they'll do those for the State Department. The U.S. military and Armed Forces Radio and Television, we're there just for the U.S. military and to provide them information that they aren't able to get because they're not here in the United States. And so our information and our entertainment is strictly focused on what you would already see here already. We're just providing it to those folks overseas who don't have it. To your second question on information between the two different, we don't try to censor our information. I'll be quite honest with you, because quite frankly, in today's world, it doesn't work. So we try to be as honest and upfront as we possibly can. Now, if there is a security issue, we quite frankly will tell them up front. This is a security concern and we can't tell you about it, or see your local commander at the local level. But you probably have all experienced the fact that if you say the wrong information on the internet these days, it'll be corrected pretty quickly. Yes, it's closed. Norton Air Force Base used to be where the Air Force had its audiovisual program, and there were graphic designers and videographers and storytellers. They did the long form story. The Air Force News story, I think, is about an hour that at every commander's call once a month, commanders are obligated to show this long 1-hour film. Well, that's all completely gone. In fact, the installation is gone. But what we've taken now is what we've done is, this is a volunteer force, as I mentioned before. So we've listened to how they get for information. If you look at our folks today in terms of how they ingest information, it's quick, it's direct, and they want it when they want it. So we've got to have, and these mobile devices, smartphones, are typically the way we get information to them. So what we're doing, we're taking heavy use of the internet services that we have, and we're being able to post on there and let them know where the information they can go to get it. and where they can get additional information. Now, if you're a graphic artist, you'll know that that's changed dramatically on how we do things, but it's still being effectively used. In fact, at the Defense Information School, where we have the training for those folks, we still train graphic artists. And yes, they are still using pencils. Now, the whole concept behind that is you've got to learn how to do the basics in order to do the computer stuff as well. So they'll go all the way from pencil graphics and drawings of various things and learn how to apply that to the electronic age. And I will tell you, it's very, very effective. Yes. Oh, yes. Yes, you know what, and that's a very good point. I've been asked that before, and I'll give you the answer straight. One of the best things I love about this country is our truth and our honesty with folks. Will it work effectively immediately? No. But over time, I think even ISIS or anybody who may be hostile toward this country will see that we are genuinely trying to be just good citizens of the world. And yes, they will see my material, they'll see what our soldiers are doing, and I think they'll get to know exactly who they are and what the quality people we are. I will tell you one thing that's been very effective for me, and I've seen this personally. I spent some time at the latter part of my career in Afghanistan and Iraq when I was on active duty. And believe it or not, we were broadcasting our stations there, and yes, some of our local population was able to understood English, was actually able to do that. They had a better understanding of who we were. They would ask questions about the kinds of things that they saw on television, and they want to know more about us. So it gave us an opportunity to be able to communicate the principles and values of America just based on the material they see happening every day. Yeah. Well, I will tell you, that's not a department I normally work in. That's usually the folks who are the State Department and are some of our military. But you bring up a very good point. But let me tell you one thing, and one of the things this is my personal belief. I can't attribute this to anybody else but myself. Listen, this is a great country, and the value of the internet and the values of this country are going to merge together. To use your example of World War II and Tokyo Rose, that was a one-way conversation. She could deliver whatever she wanted. She didn't have to worry about feedback. She didn't have to worry about anything else and just making sure that she got her message across. Well, she may have. But bottom line is, in today's world, particularly when we look at how people communicate, it's mostly through the internet and that conversation we talked about. So whereas if you take the example of a Tokyo Rose, yes, she can get her information out, but she better be prepared to get what's coming back. And that's not happened today.
But how successful that lady
Well,
was?
let me first off tell you about my background is I'm a military brat. I traveled with my father all my life. I graduated from high school at Torrejon Air Base in Madrid, Spain. I read Stars and Stripes. I listened to AFN radio most of my life. I graduated from Texas A&M University, a degree in journalism, and came on active duty. I spent most of my 30 years in the Air Force overseas, utilizing the products I'm actually pushing today. So I know how to believe. I believe it. I've done 34 countries in my experience. Most of those have been very remote locations. I spent a lot of time involved with both Rwanda, both Gulf Wars, Bosnia, and I think a few terrorist activities in Germany back in the early 80s. So my background in terms of how effective this really be is based on my own personal experience of how I've seen, quite honestly, from both sides. Tokyo Rose, as was talked about earlier, was very effective, but you have to ask yourself the question, why was she effective? What was it that made her be able to do that? And quite frankly, I think she personalized it. If she's asking who's sleeping with your wife today, that's a personal attack. And there was no one there to answer it. And my feeling is, and what I'm telling you today, is I think today's world, the way the communications are designed and effectively use it, we have an answer. So if someone asked that question, we could probably get an answer for that person pretty quickly. No, I don't, and I really don't. I think we still have, and I think it's accurately described as a radical group. If you look throughout history, we've had these before. This is much worse than it's been ever before, but it is something we've encountered. But each and every time it's been encountered and overcome by the folks who believe in a better way to treat the world. And I think that'll happen here as well. But again, it's about communication. It's about information. The more information we can continue to provide those folks who are on the fence, who won't know, the radical ones, they're not going to convert. So we're not even trying to do that. But those people who aren't aware, who don't know, we have to keep on providing them information. I think we have more avenues there today than we ever did before, both the over-the-air as well as through the internet. But I think once we continue to provide the information, they will make that decision and they will see the balance that we're trying to achieve.
How'd you get your, say, your Nielsen report? Who's doing that?
Nielsen, it's the commercial Nielsen report. You asked me about the Nielsen ratings. We get the same one that most broadcasters get. Yeah.
They're out there talking to all of the Egyptians on the hill and asking what they're watching.
No. Our Nielsen ratings are strictly for the U.S. And we are strictly, keep in mind again, Armed Forces Radio and Television is strictly for the U.S. military only. Yeah. Right. Yeah, we're using the same analytics that you're hearing in the commercial world. The computer and the whole internet services provide us for broadcasters something we never had before. We had to rely on the Nielsen ratings and whether the television was on or not. We don't have to worry about that anymore. In today's analysis, I can tell you exactly the age of the person or the age group that they're in, where they're from, what their listening patterns are, strictly by where they grow and surf on the net. And so based on that, I can target my information a lot better, and I know how to serve them best. It is public information. Quite frankly, I surf the net and get most of it. Well, it is. If you remember our days when we were doing commercials in our marketing, it's the same in marketing surveys we did back in the old days. It's just the difference now is it's much more accurate because you can go directly to the internet and find out exactly where they're going. In the old days, we used to do our marketing surveys and decide what age group our commercials were for based on our surveys. And whether they were honest in the survey, depending on whether you're going to get good information or not. But we don't have to worry about that as much. In today's world, it's much, much more accurate because it's just all electronic. It's all facts. Right. Yes. Yeah. No, you asked about my job and whether it has political ties. The answer is no. I'm what they call a senior executive service, so I'm a part of the senior level of the Department of Defense. It's not politically tied. So my position, and the great thing about it is that I am not politically tied. I have be able to take care of our soldiers out in the field. That's all I have to worry about. Yes. Well, the only reason why you asked about why we're located at Fort Meade, Maryland, which typically has the NSA located and a couple of other security clearances, it really came down what real estate was available at the time we built the building. I don't think there was any thought behind that. In fact, we're completely separate. There's no direct tie to the NSA or any other security area. I jokingly tell people I've got secure areas on both sides, and here I am, the most public thing you could possibly ask for in between them all. But no, we're no tie at all. Yes?
What's your relationship with the Voice of America?
Voice of America belongs to the State Department, and we don't really have any affiliation with them at all. We don't feed them information because they take the news from America. The same thing you find for us for fighting the military for information for the military is the same principle for the Voice of America. They'll take whatever's happening here in the United States and is reflective of our country, and they'll convert that to the language of the area they're broadcasting to so that they know what's going on as well. That's probably the only thing that's even close. We use the same information. Yes, question back here.
Every 4 years, the news heats up with a lot of political flashpoints. How do you handle that?
It's easy for us. We don't. How do we handle the political side of the house? Our responsibility is to our folks. Again, I go back to the volunteers. One of the things we emphasize during this time of year is to make sure that they, through our news programs, that you all see the same thing that they see. They get a balance of all the different news and all the different views, or whether we like them or don't. They're all aired on Armed Forces Radio and Television so that they can make the choice on who they would like to elect as their president. And so during this time period, for example, there's a military regulation that we don't involve ourselves with political activity during those at all, anytime. That's prohibited. But we do want to make sure they have information to be able to make a choice, because even though they're not stationed here in the United States or they're not here, they're still Americans, and they still have the opportunity to vote. One of the things we also emphasize is the fact that they do exercise that right to vote, since they're going to, honestly, they have to live with the consequences. Yes?
Can I buy 30 minutes on your program?
Yeah, you ask about an application of where we have one or not. Right now, the defense.gov, our website, does not have one, although by the end of the year, we'll have that created. when we started talking about applications, we took a slow road in terms of how we were doing that, just to see exactly where our audience was going. To talk earlier about the analytics, we looked and see what was best way to reach our folks. Was it through an app, or was it going to be through the internet itself? So we now recognize that an app is probably the most expedient way to get information to them, and we're going to be doing that. Now, if you're an Air Force individual, there is an application already out there on both the OS as well as the Android devices for Airman Magazine, for example. And so if you want to know about what's happening in the Air Force, there's an app for that. If you want to know what's happening with the Army, there's an app for that. If you want to know what's happening with the Marine Corps, there's an app, and with the Navy as well. All of them have had applications. We were a little bit hesitant on the DoD side simply because of making sure we reached our audience. When you look at the DoD side, our folks are a little bit older age group in terms of demographics who go to that website. And so that's the reason for the delay. I know when I go to the Marine Corps site, I know the Marines are there. I can see who's watching that site. That's a completely different audience than I'll find on defense.gov. So we target it that way. Yes. 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 Well, listen, thank you very much. I really do appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. I hope all the best.
Well, another excellent program. Thank you very much, Ray, and we really appreciate your taking the time out from Washington to come down here. I think you'll find the weather down here is a lot better than what you get up in Washington. I think you'll find the people down here are more interesting than what you'll find in Washington. But anyway, thanks for everybody coming, and we've got a great program in the future coming up. The next speaker will be the second Friday in January. Will be Mort Krim. For those that don't know Mort was an anchor in both Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia. He also was the backup to Paul Harvey on radio when Paul was on vacation, and an author. And he's got a great sense of humor. I think you'll enjoy that one too. The next other event we have coming up this month, or next month, will be the meet and greet on the 26th of January at Gecko's. For those that haven't picked up a flyer on our trip to Italy proposal, back on the author's desk, there's one for everybody if you'd like to pick one up and take a look at that and look at it in detail or look through it at the website. Thank you very much.